Hello and welcome back to Creation Research Unplugged. I'm Indiana Joe and I've got a host of friends from all over the world which are bringing you this week's episode of Creation Research Unplugged. Now we're here in this absolutely stunning, beautiful day surrounded by a lake and fields, and it is truly the start of British summertime, but we've still got the remnants of spring all around us. From the greenery to the animals, we have the birds and the babies. They're absolutely wonderful day to come out and explore and find out more about the amazing creation that God has given us. The creation and the world that was made by Jesus Christ for Jesus Christ and is used to bless us. So join me and the rest of our friends as we delve into another full episode of creation, fossils, archaeology, Noah's flood, and hey, we've even got some literature and acting mixed in there as well. It's going to be a wonderful episode, absolutely packed. So join us, let's go and explore, let's go and find out more about this wonderful world that God has given us. You know, on beautiful days like this, it is amazing to just come and sit down. You're surrounded by God's creation and you can just take it all in. I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm looking out across the pond and we can see the birds, we can see the geese, the babies. There's a wonderful array of trees and beautiful greenery and some of the big pine trees in the back as well. It's just tranquil, it's really nice to sit and settle and just take it all in. The birds' song, and it really is amazing. But have you ever stopped to think and wonder, how did this all get here? The beauty that we see around us, and why do we see things as beautiful? If we are truly a product of random mutations, chance, and, evolution says we fought and clawed and killed and scratched and hurt our way to the top because it's survival of the fittest, which also means the ones that are not fit die out. And evolution is really a horrible concept to think about because you have to kill and things have to die, and it's just a nasty way of going around creating new things. But the reality is, everything that we see around us, the planet, the universe, the stars, the galaxies, all of it was created by Jesus Christ. And it was created for Jesus Christ. That's what it says in John 1 and in Colossians 1. It says that all things were made by Jesus, all things were made for Jesus, and Jesus Christ is the one who came to die for us. But how old is this earth? And how has people's perceptions of how old the earth is changed over time as we've explored more? Because yes, in today's world, a vast majority of people and scientists believe that the Earth is somewhere between 4 to 4.5 billion years old. And they believe that life evolved all by itself and natural processes can explain everything around us. But if you think the idea of millions of years was a new concept, you really shouldn't be surprised. It's been known for many, many, many years. You see, even the Greeks had an idea of evolution, and the Greeks had an idea of a very, very old Earth. And the Greeks' idea of evolution was very, very racist. You see, they believed that they'd evolved from the slime, but they believed that their slime was slightly better quality slime than the ones that the Jews had evolved from. Don't believe me? Just look it up. It was a very racist society and a very racist way of thinking about it because they believed that the Jews were inferior to them. Yes, the idea of evolution is not new, it goes back millennia. But how has people's perception around the world changed as we've gone forward and we've sort of taken a biblical stand and an anti-biblical stand on the age of the earth? Well, let's find out by going back to the literature, going back to one of Shakespeare's plays as it happens, and actually looking at what did people believe about the age of the earth at the time of Shakespeare.
The year was 1564, and a young man by the name of Gulimus was born. He would go on to become famous for words like bandit that he invented. And in 1599, he invented a word lackluster for use in a play he'd written called As You Like It. But by this time, the young man was better known as William Shakespeare. As You Like It? It's a love at first sight story, eyeball to eyeball stuff. And yes, eyeball is also a word that Shakespeare invented. When the play was first written, he was 35 years old. So watch for an age-related comment in this section from As You Like It, Act 4, Scene 1, presented to us by Katherine Nilsbird.
her person, I say I will not have you.
In mine own person, I die.
No, Faith, die by attorney. The poor world is almost 6,000 years old, and in all that time has no man died in his own person in a love course.
What? A 6,000-year-old Earth? The year was 1599 AD, after the birth of Christ. Shakespeare lived before Archbishop Usher wrote his famous chronology book saying the world was created in 4004 BC, which would mean in his day it wasn't yet 6,000 years old. But you see, the modern fundamentalists didn't make up this date. It's been around forever, quite literally. You see, you can read it in the 2nd century in Theophilus. You can read it in Martin Luther. You can read it in Augustine. I mean, Luther says, Moses tells us the world has not yet attained 6,000 years old. All that Shakespeare's doing is reflecting the common knowledge. If you're one of those modern people who think there's room for a traditional old earth view of scriptures, forget it. You don't find it in history, you don't find it in literature, and you certainly don't find it in the Word of God. I'll see you next time.
Now here at Creation Research UK, we've been really blessed to be able to have an incredible amount of access to real artefacts, real things from history that reflect God's glory. And what do I mean by that? Well, remember, all things were made for Jesus Christ. All things were made by Jesus Christ, including us. We were made by Christ, for Christ, in order to glorify Christ. But of course, from the time when Christ had first created us, things have changed. No longer do we fully desire Christ, no longer do we want to enjoy a relationship. We have fallen away, we are full of sin. That's why we needed a saviour, to come and call us to himself, to be able to free us from our sins, so he died on a cross for us. And down throughout history, humankind has related and reflected this sin-filled state. The idea that, yes, we believe that there's something else out there, we believe there's an afterlife, we believe we want to go to heaven, but we're going to try every single way to get there without Jesus Christ. And you see, you find this down throughout all the civilizations, all the cultures, including the ancient Egyptians. So as we begin to wrap up our archaeological delve and exploration into ancient Egyptians, let's go and join myself and Caleb one more time to sort of give a conclusion to the way that they believed the afterlife came about, the way that they believed what you had to do, as well as, well, let's go find out exactly what a biblical perspective is. Hello and welcome back to Biblical Archaeology. So we've learned from Caleb over the last few episodes about the Egyptians and their belief in the afterlife and how far they would go to make sure that their dead were preserved in just the right way. Clearly it was extremely important to them. Now, what's really interesting, looking at it from, again, a biblical perspective, because the Bible teaches that we as human beings are spiritual creatures. The Bible teaches that there is an afterlife, and the Bible teaches that the key is through Jesus Christ. But what's really fascinating is, as far as you can go back through history, human beings have not only always been human beings, they've always had some form of religion specifically connected to the afterlife. Even if it's not as deep or as far as the Egyptians went with it, is to actually preserving the body with all its finery and making sure that you had all the different trinkets and artifacts there to assist you in the afterlife. And you know, these tombs and pyramids and caves would be absolutely full of food and boats and tools and everything you could possibly need to help you in the afterlife. Even if the culture didn't go as far as that, they still had some connection with a spiritual existence, even to the point of burying the dead, celebrating it in some form, sending the dead off to the afterlife. And we really shouldn't be surprised, because as the Bible teaches us, we are spiritual creatures. We are human beings. We do have that spiritual connection. But ever since Adam ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, sin entered the world, and the world was cursed. Ever since then, human beings have been groping to find the truth, the spiritual truth, the answer to life's problems, because there has to be something more than what we experience today. And so it really does provide excellent evidence that we didn't just come from apes. We're not just the result of random mutations. We are created as spiritual beings. We are designed to have a spiritual relationship with our Creator. It just so happens that because of the sin, because of the curse, because of the death that we experience, many of us will look in the wrong direction. So I urge you today, if you haven't already, to explore this Jesus and who he is. Go to www.creationresearch.net and discover more about the truth of Jesus Christ and who he is. Caleb, thank you very much. We're going to have one little more aspect of the ancient Egyptians before we move on to our next biblical archaeology subject. Now, over the last few episodes, we've been looking at Creation Research 101, specifically all about fossils. Well, today we're going to wrap up our sort of discussion into fossils, and we're going to dive into trace fossils. And it's our final little topic that we're going to look at regarding fossils. We've gone through all the different types of fossils you can find, all the different ways you can recognise a fossil, and how they all formed. We've even talked about some really unusual fossils and how quickly they can form if they're put in the right conditions. It's got everything to do with the process and nothing to do with time. So join us as we join my siblings once again and we delve into Creation Research 101 and we look at trace fossils. Fossils that are not quite fossils, or are they? An interesting topic. Let's go find out more. When is a fossil not really a fossil? We're going to find out today. I'm Indiana Joe. Welcome to Creation Research 101. And I'm here, as usual, with my siblings. We have Elijah, we have Talitha, and we have Esther. And today, we're looking at a type of fossil called trace fossils. Trace fossils are not fossils of an actual creature, but instead, they are the remains of traces of that creature. What do I mean? Well, let's have a look down here with Esther. Esther, what have we got down here?
We've got worm burrows.
Fossil worm burrows. Come in and get close up and look at some of the detail in these. All these squiggly wiggly little lines. This is where a worm had burrowed through the soft sandy sediment and left its trails behind. It's not the actual worm. It's not an actual fossil of the worm, but it's a fossil of the trails that the worm left behind. It's a trace of the worm. It's a trace fossil. Now, interesting, this rock comes from a place in the UK called the Valley of the Rocks, and this is called Devonian rock. Devonian? Well, Valley of the Rocks is actually in a county called Devon. Yes, these rocks do not have anything to do with millions of years or evolution. They have everything to do with where they were first discovered. Devonian, the rocks first studied in Devon. That's literally all it means. Talitha, what fossil have we got?
A hadrosaur egg.
What was that? Say it louder.
A hadrosaur egg.
A hadrosaur egg. Is that a type of dinosaur?
Yes.
A dinosaur egg. Wow. This is a real dinosaur egg, by the way, guys. It's from all the way over in Mongolia. It's a hadrosaur dinosaur. That's one of the ones with the ducked build. This is a real dinosaur egg. It's not the dinosaur, and it's not the dinosaur that laid the egg, but it is a trace of the dinosaur, something that the dinosaur left behind. Of course, they may very well have a baby dinosaur inside it, but this is what is called a trace fossil. It's a trace of a dinosaur that once came across and laid a dinosaur egg. It is amazing to think that there could be a baby dinosaur inside, and maybe one day we will get it x-rayed and find out exactly how much of a skeleton there actually is. Okay, final example of a trace fossil. Elijah?
I have.
What on earth have you got there?
I've got a big pile of dinosaur poo.
A big pile of dinosaur poo. Lovely. Well, this is from America, from the USA. This is real dinosaur poo. And you may ask, how on earth do we know that that is dinosaur poo? Well, you see, some dinosaurs were buried and fossilised so brilliantly and so exquisitely that they were dyed with the contents of their stomach and their intestines still inside of them. And so when you're digging up your dinosaur fossil, you can find a fossil dinosaur stomach with fossil dinosaur poo already sitting inside it, certainly in the intestines. And so what we know, if we can match up inside the dinosaur, we can match up to this stuff that we find outside of the dinosaur, and we know for sure it's fossil poo. Now, this is called coprolite. That's just the posh word that we use to say fossil poo. It's exactly the same thing. Again, This is not the dinosaur. This is something that the dinosaur left behind. It's something that the dinosaur has left a trace of. It's a trace of the dinosaur. This is a trace fossil of fossil poo. So you see, fossils come in many shapes and sizes. We've talked about mould, we've talked about casts, we've talked about permineralisation. A similar one is petrification, like the big fossil trees that you find. And you also find trace fossils. Not the actual creature, but the remains that they left behind. Like worm burrows, like dinosaur eggs, and like fossil poo. And yes, you can find this all over the place. But there's one thing you know for sure, these things were not hanging around for very long. The worm burrowed through sand, and on the very next tide, those burrows would have been washed away. This had to be buried before the next tide came. The dinosaur egg, well, reptile eggs are sort of soft and leathery, and they don't last around for very long, certainly not for millions of years. This would have been able to last just a few months before it began to rot away and go horrible, or the dinosaur hatched out. This had to be buried quickly. And, well, that's for what I just dinosaur do. If you have any pets or you look after a dog or a cat or anything like that, you know when they do their business in the garden, it doesn't hang around for very long. It goes horrible and mouldy and stinky and gross very, very quickly. This doesn't hang around for a long time. If you want to get dinosaur do preserved in its perfect form, you need to bury it very quickly. You need to bury them all very deeply, and you need to bury them without the presence of oxygen. Fossilisation has got nothing to do with time, but everything to do with a process. Get the process right, you get a fossil. Get the process wrong, time will destroy your creature or the remains of that creature long before it even has a chance to turn into a fossil. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining me and for helping us discuss these fossils. Join us next time as we're going to look at living fossils and delve into the world of Creation Research 101. Goodbye and God bless. 1 Chronicles 16 talks about the trees of the forest singing for joy because of the coming of the Lord. Oh, but be warned, they were singing for joy because the Lord was coming to judge. Yes, God is a God of judgment. He is going to judge the world one day, but he didn't leave us in our sin. He sent Jesus Christ to come and save us. But let's go today, let's explore our creation special. We're talking all about trees, and we're looking at some of the great things that they can do, as well as, hey, how old do you think the oldest tree is, and what can we learn about it in relation to the Bible? G'day, g'day, g'day. Welcome to our creation special, where we're talking all about these things, trees, in this week's episode of Creation Research Unplugged. Now, there are actually two major groups of trees, and we've got examples of both of them in this woods here. This is the first one. This is the English oak, and it's a deciduous tree. What does deciduous mean? Well, it means every single year, come the autumn, the leaves change colour, and they go those wonderful orangey brown to sometimes sort of a dull to dusky black, and they fall off the tree and fall to the ground, and we go kicking through them. Of course, this time of year, they're a wonderful bright green colour because they are producing the sugar. They're producing the sap which the tree uses through a process called photosynthesis. It takes the energy from the sun, it mixes it with water and nutrients that the tree sucks up from the ground, and it produces its own sugar to help the tree to grow. That's the first kind of tree. Oh, they don't actually change colour though come the autumn. You see, those colours are always there. They're just masked by something called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is what turns the leaves green. It's what turns all leaves green, including even the grass around our feet. But come the autumn, the tree actually creates a scar that leads to the leaf, and no more nutrients, no more water will go to the leaf, no more good sap can come back from the leaf. It creates a scar, it blocks it over, and the chlorophyll begins to fade, revealing the beautiful colours that were there all along. That's our first kind of tree. Our second kind of tree is just over here, and it's quite a beautiful one. Come and have a look at this. It's enormous. Look at the size of this thing. This is a coniferous tree. Coniferous, or we call them conifers. It's a big fir tree. It's got slightly different bark, and the leaves are also fairly different. Come in and get close, have a look at that. You've seen the big broad oak leaves, but these things have needles. They have little spines, and because of that, they're not actually very good at producing sugar. Not anywhere near as efficient as the great big broadleaf trees. But these trees are coniferous, and that means they are actually something quite clever. You see, they can keep their green leaves all year round. They just fall off in dribs and drabs as they need replacing, and that's what all this sort of pine cone litter around here is, or these little pine needles. Well, because they keep their leaves all year round, because they keep their little spines all year round, they can continue producing their sugar all year round. They don't need to stop growing like the deciduous trees. Now, trees are absolutely fascinating subjects. In particular, let's talk about their age. Because you know, when you get it and you cut it in half, you've got the rings. You can work out how old the tree is. Of course, you have to be a little bit careful because in this country, in the UK, we have 4 seasons. And we have winter, and we have really only enough sunlight and summertime to put on 1 ring each year. But if you go to the jungle where it's bright and warm and sunny all year round, and it gets much, much more brilliant weather even than what we're getting here today, they can put on many, many more rings than just 1, sometimes up to 4. So you've got a false piece of information if you want to believe that those trees are, well, if you think they're actually 20 years old, they're not at all, they're just 5 years old. Interesting, you have to be careful sometimes. But you know, the oldest known tree in the world, the oldest known still living tree in the world, is one of these kind of trees. It's a pine tree. In fact, it's called a bristlecone pine, and it's very, very old, around 4,500 years. But then don't be surprised that it isn't even older, because remember, the Bible, which is a true history of the world, says that just over 4,500 years ago, the world changed. Noah's flood. The world was completely destroyed by water. Huge trees were swept up, caught up and dumped and buried and fossilised. So don't be surprised you don't find any trees older than 4,500 years old. That's the oldest they could possibly be, according to the Bible. And the fact that we find the oldest trees in the world, when we know that trees could easily get much, much older than that, are only 4,500 years old, is a wonderful testimony that the Bible's record is true. The Bible's source of history is true from the very beginning. Let's go and explore one last final bit about our wonderful world of trees. You know, trees are an absolutely beautiful part of God's creation, and they're really useful as well. Remember, and we've said it many times, but we'll keep saying it, all things were created by Jesus Christ, for His glory, and many of them are there to bless us. And trees are an extremely important example of that. They really are an incredible blessing because, well, they don't just provide oxygen for us, they don't just provide food for us, they don't just provide, you know, furniture and bits of building material for us. They're also incredibly good at filtering the air, at purifying the air. In fact, a study recently done showed that if you plant a series of trees throughout some of the major cities in the world, it actually begins to purify the air, not just on a local level, but also on a city-wide level. It really is quite remarkable when you think about it, and these things are here for God's glory and to bless us. But, well, unfortunately, we abuse the world today. Many places we don't actually look after the world that God has given us. That is a problem of sin because we've been called to be good stewards of the world. Oh, that's not to worship the world. That's not to become a hyper-environmentalist and to bow down and worship the trees. That's not to say that actually we can control the climate. But it is to say that we've been commanded by God to be good stewards of the earth. It was our first job, mankind's first job that he was given in the garden, was to tend the garden. That was the first job God gave Adam, and it's a job that we should still be doing today. Looking after the world that God has given us and using it to give him glory. We've also been given dominion over the world, so we can chop down trees and we can use it for good things. But we should always plant new trees, we should always look after the world. It really is very important. But trees, absolutely wonderful, great to climb, great to have fun with, and an incredible part of God's creation. Don't you just love flowers? They are absolutely beautiful and stunning, and you know, this is the time of year to come and explore them. I mean, they're delicate little petals, it's scent, it's just absolutely amazing. Yes, all things were made by Jesus Christ and they were made for his glory, but they were also made to bless us. We were created in the image of God. We were created to delight in all of his creation, including the flowers. And ever since we've been created, we've not only been fascinated by the flowers, we've helped to breed them and develop them and turn them into all the different variety we see around today. But God is the original designer and God is the original artist, and a beautiful and incredible and intricate artist he is. Let's go back to Australia, let's go to Jurassic Ark, let's find our international director John Mackay as he talks about a very particular type of flower, and one that is absolutely beautiful and it's absolutely glorious for the eye to behold.
Don't you just love orchids? Here we are in our orchid house here down under. I'm the creation guy, John Mackay, and welcome to another session in our Creation Research Live series. I've been growing orchids for years. I mean, this beautiful purple and gold catalea, and look at this strange spidery one. And what about this beautiful white moth orchid here? You know something? You live in a world in which the textbooks love to push that evolution is scientific and creation is religious. Fiddle faddle. Creation is something that everybody recognises, and it's really practical. What do I mean? You see this Phalaenopsis here, this moth orchid? It's a fake. Nobody believes it happened by itself. It's made out of plastic and silk. It's beautiful. Somebody who existed before it, somebody who's not a part of it, and somebody who's smarter than it took plastic that doesn't do stems, silk that doesn't do orchids, put it together, and they created it. This is a creation. It didn't happen by accident. Would you like to see the evidence the original creator, the God who made orchids, is smarter than we are? Take this spider orchid, for example, here. Look at that strange looking plant here. Oh, and this one here? There's some nice little fertilized seed pods. We're going to get millions of little orchids out of here. You see, if we want to make another moth orchid, we have to create it again ourselves. God built the creation program into the orchids so they continue to produce their own kind, just like he said they would, and you can trust him to be the same forever. I'm the creation guy. Join me next time.
Well, there you have it. That brings us to the end of this week's episode of Creation Research Unplugged. I hope once again you enjoyed it and it gave good food for thought and has got some really interesting and insightful things to help you during lockdown. As always, make sure you like this video, make sure you follow us on YouTube, make sure you hit the bell so that you receive notifications as when we put a new episode on. We're going to be continuing this until at least the end of the UK's lockdown as we go forward, and we'll be looking to make various other series in the coming years. Next time we're going to be adding a new addition to our little clips that we put into Creation Research Unplugged. Some of you have written in some questions, which is what we wanted to do a few weeks back, but people are finally getting in touch, which is absolutely wonderful. Make sure that you email us at info@creationresearchuk.com if you have any questions, because we're going to start featuring them in a segment every single week starting from next week. So join us then. Make sure you join us on Facebook as we put daily things out and continue to learn about the wonderful world around us that God gave us to enjoy. Goodbye, God bless, and we'll see you very soon.